They built 35 homes on land that wasn't theirs. Not stolen with guns, not snatched in the dark. No, they did it with papers, stamps, and the smug smile of an HOA president who thought history could be erased with a clipboard. But what they didn't know was this. Some land remembers. And so did Malcolm Rivers. The Alabama sun baked the soil, same as it had for over a century. To outsiders, it was just grass, dirt, and a slow-moving stream. But for Malcolm, it was blood. His family's blood. His great-grandfather, Isaiah Rivers, had bought these acres after emancipation. 60 acres of freedom that no master could touch. People back then said it was impossible, a black man owning this much land in the South. But Isaiah had worked the rails, saved every dime, and planted himself here like an oak tree. Malcolm grew up under those stories. As a boy, he'd run through the cornfields, his grandmother's voice chasing him. "Child, this land is your backbone. Lose it, and you lose yourself." He believed her. Every fence post he repaired, every crop he pulled from the earth was proof the Rivers family still stood. He even built a dam on the far side of the property. Stone, timber, and sheer stubbornness. It held back the water, fed his cattle, and reminded him he could shape his land, not the other way around. But permanence makes some people restless, and nothing makes America itch like a black man holding on to something permanent. It began with surveyors, neon vests, clipboards, like gnats buzzing at the edges of his fields. Malcolm pulled up in his old Ford and leaned out. "You boys lost? Ain't nothing past that fence but Rivers, Bert." One of them smiled politely, too politely. "Oh, no, sir, just prepping for the new community development." "Community development?" Malcolm narrowed his eyes. "Funny, nobody asked the community. According to county records, this area is zoned for residential expansion." Malcolm laughed. Hard, bitter. "County records didn't bleed in this dirt. My family did. So tell your bosses this land ain't for sale. Not now, not when hell freezes." They nodded, scribbled something, and left. But they came back the week after, and the week after that. Then came the bulldozers. Malcolm's chest hollowed out when he saw them ripping down trees his grandfather had planted. Cement trucks lined up, foundations pouring into earth that still carried his grandmother's footprints. He stormed into the site trailer, cheap plastic walls, humming AC, the smell of arrogance. A man in a golf shirt sat behind the desk sipping coffee like he owned the county. "You're building on my land," Malcolm said flatly. He didn't blink. "Sir, this development has been approved by the HOA and the county. Everything is in order." "The only thing in order is the deed in my name. This is Rivers' land." He leaned back, smirk tugging at his lips. "Maybe you didn't get the memo. Progress is coming. Sell now and walk away with a nice check, or stay and watch us build around you." Malcolm's laugh came out low, dangerous. Progress. That what you call stealing with air conditioning? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The concrete drying outside was answer enough. Weeks turned into months, and 35 homes rose like insults. Families moved in, shiny SUVs, golden retrievers, porch swings. Their kids played tag in fields that once grew his corn. Their sprinklers watered over history like it was dust. Every night, Malcolm sat on his porch watching those lights flicker. Each one felt like a slap. He prayed, clenched his fists, fought in courts, but nothing moved. Judges didn't care. The county smiled past him. The HOA mailed letters about community standards, even tried fining him for his grandfather's barn. Malcolm muttered to himself, crumpling one of their notices in his fist. "Community standards. I am the damn community." But sarcasm didn't stop the bills piling up, and bitterness ate at him like rust. One night, restless, he walked down to the reservoir. The moon stretched silver over the water, pressing against the dam he had built with his own hands. He stood there a long time, listening. The water was calm, steady, patient, almost too patient. And for the first time, a thought crept in. Soft, dangerous, impossible to shake. What if I let it go? Malcolm whispered to himself, almost ashamed. No, that's crazy. But the thought didn't leave. It sat with him, heavy, waiting. And as he turned back toward the glow of 35 stolen porch lights, he realized something. Maybe the river had been waiting longer than he had. The thought should have terrified him, but it didn't. It stuck in his chest like a splinter, each day pushing deeper. Every HOA letter, every fine, every smug wave from a new neighbor watering their lawn on his family's soil. The whisper of the reservoir grew louder. The dam wasn't just holding back water anymore. It was holding back him. By day, he tried to drown it out with work, fixing fences, feeding cattle, sitting at the diner with his friend Joe, pretending nothing was wrong. But by night, the water called him. Not in words, but in weight. Steady, patient, almost hungry. Let me go, it seemed to say. I'll wash it all clean. The HOA made sure not to let him forget his place. One morning, he found a bright orange letter nailed to his barn door. Notice of violation, non-compliance with community standards. Malcolm read it aloud, voice dripping with sarcasm. Oh, you mean the standard where you steal a man's land and then complain his barn don't match your white picket fence fantasy? He crumpled it and tossed it in the dirt. His grandmother used to say silence was dignity, but Malcolm was discovering sarcasm was survival. At the diner that week, he overheard two of the new residents gossiping over pancakes. I heard he still thinks the land belongs to him. One said, buttering her toast like she was spreading poison. The other laughed. Well, it's not 1865 anymore. Times change. Malcolm's fork froze midair. He set it down slow, walked to their booth and leaned in just enough. You right. Times do change. Used to need a whip and chain to steal a man's land. Now all it takes is a judge's pen and an HOA newsletter. Their faces paled, like milk left too long in the sun. Malcolm tipped his hat, turned, and walked out, his chest tight, his blood buzzing. Joe caught up with him outside. Damn, Malk, you trying to get yourself run out of town? Malcolm smirked. Run out of town? They already paved my damn town over. What more are they going to take? The whisper of the water grew stronger. Every night he walked the dam like a man checking a loaded gun. He could feel the pressure, the force, waiting on the other side. And every time, the question dug deeper. What if I let it go? The houses sat right below. 35 of them. Fresh siding, neat lawns, picket fences, all of them planted on river's land like weeds. He imagined it sometimes, water roaring down, wood and concrete swallowed whole, SUVs floating like toys. The arrogance, the letters, the laughter, all gone in a single rush. And then just as quick, he shook the thought away. No, I ain't that man, he whispered. But the truth, he was starting not to believe himself. One Sunday, he attended a county meeting to plead again. His voice rang with the weight of his ancestors. Y'all paved over my family's history and call it progress. Do you expect me to stand here proud while you bury everything we built? The councilman adjusted his glasses, not meeting his eyes. Mr. Rivers, progress benefits the community as a whole. Malcolm tilted his head. So, stealing's fine? As long as everybody gets a slice? That's the lesson? The room went still. Then, like always, they moved to the next agenda item, as if he never spoken. Malcolm sat down, jaw locked, heart pounding. He felt the river again. Not in his ears this time, but in his blood. Steady, patient, waiting. That night, Joe stopped by with a flask. They sat on the porch watching porch lights glitter across the valley like 35 fireflies too arrogant to die. Joe said carefully, Malk, you gotta let it go. They won. Don't let this land eat you alive. Malcolm didn't answer right away. He just sipped, eyes fixed on the horizon. Finally, he said, low and sharp,
They didn't win, Joe. They just don't know what's coming. My granddaddy built this land with his hands. If they want to bury it in cement, then maybe it's time the river takes it back." Joe turned, startled. "You talking crazy now?" Malcolm's smile was humorless, dangerous. "Crazy? Nah. Crazy's thinking you can steal a man's legacy and not pay the price." And for the first time, the whisper in his chest didn't sound like temptation. It sounded like truth.
The river had become his closest friend, and like any friend that listened too well, it was starting to sound persuasive. By now, the HOA wasn't just building houses. They were building cages, invisible, suffocating, paper-thin cages dressed up as rules. One morning, Malcolm found another letter in his mailbox. The envelope smelled like arrogance. "Notice of fine, unauthorized farming equipment." Malcolm squinted at the page, muttering aloud, "What? Unauthorized farming equipment on farmland? What's next? Unauthorized air in my lungs?" He balled it up, tossed it into the dirt, and laughed to himself. Not a happy laugh, the kind that sounds like a gun being cocked. But the HOA wasn't laughing. They sent another letter, and another. Each one was a nail in his patience. Finally, they escalated. A man in a polo shirt and mirrored sunglasses showed up at his gate, clipboard in hand, like he was the sheriff of a world Malcolm didn't vote for. "Mr. Rivers," he started, his tones syrupy with fake politeness, "the board has determined that your barn is not up to visual standards for the community. You have 30 days to either paint it or remove it." Malcolm stared at him, slow and hard. "That barn's older than your entire community. It's seen more history than your whole damn HOA. The man chuckled, scribbled something on his clipboard. 30 days, sir. Rules are rules." Malcolm leaned against the gate. "Funny how rules only get written when a black man still standing bothers you." The man shifted uncomfortably, muttered something about "just doing my job," and left. Malcolm watched him go, muttering under his breath, "So was Bull Connor, and look how history remembers him." That night, Malcolm walked the dam again. The water glistened under the moonlight, whispering louder than ever. He crouched low, touched the stone with his calloused hands. "They don't see you, but I do. You're my insurance policy, my justice waiting." The river didn't answer, but it didn't need to. At the diner, Joe noticed the shift. Malcolm wasn't just bitter anymore. He was simmering. "Malk," Joe said between sips of coffee, "that's your daddy's look. That's trouble." Malcolm smirked, stabbing his fork into a pancake. "Trouble's when you can't do nothing. Me? I got options." "Options?" Joe raised an eyebrow. Malcolm leaned in, voice low. "What happens when 35 houses get a surprise bath? Who they gonna blame then? HOA? County? Or maybe they finally remember whose land they built on?" Joe's fork clattered onto his plate. "You're out your damn mind. That's jail time, Malk. That's worse." Malcolm chewed slow, swallowed, then said, "Sometimes jail's freer than living in a cage of somebody else's rules." The HOA turned the screws tighter. A week later, they showed up with deputies, tried to tack another notice of violation to his barn. Malcolm intercepted them, arms crossed, jaw tight. "You boys lost?" The deputy avoided his eyes. "Just following procedure, sir." "Yeah, funny how procedure always walks in wearing the same damn boots." The officer looked uneasy, but the HOA rep smirked like he already tasted victory. Malcolm leaned in close enough for him to smell the years of sweat in his shirt. "You think a piece of paper scares me? Paper burns, paper rots, but rivers? Rivers last forever." The smirk faded. Just a little. Later that evening, Malcolm sat at his kitchen table, spreading the HOA's letters in front of him like they were enemy battle plans. He lit a cigarette, exhaled smoke over the pile. 35 houses. 35 graves if the river gets a taste. He almost scared himself with that thought. Almost. But then he remembered his grandmother's voice. This land is your backbone. Lose it, and you lose yourself. They had taken his backbone. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to break theirs. The dam creaked that night under the weight of the water. Or maybe Malcolm just imagined it. He stood there for hours staring at the bolts, the stones, the places he knew were weakest, because he had built them. For the first time, he didn't just hear the water whisper. He answered it. Not yet, but soon.
If the water was his whisper, the HOA was its echo. Constant, nagging, impossible to ignore. By now, Malcolm didn't even bother opening most of their letters. They stacked on his table like unpaid bills from the devil himself. Each one carried the same perfume of arrogance. We own you. You're the problem. We decide. But then came the one that changed everything. It wasn't a fine this time. It wasn't a threat about barns or tractors or visual standards. It was worse. Notice of foreclosure, non-compliance with community regulations. Malcolm read it twice, then a third time. His hands trembled, not with fear, but with something colder, sharper. Foreclosure. On his land. His blood. His family's backbone. They really think they can bury me alive and send me the bill, he muttered, voice flat, dangerous. He slammed the letter on the table so hard the coffee mug jumped. The next day, 2 HOA reps pulled up in their shiny SUVs. They didn't even knock, just strutted up his porch like they owned it. Clipboards in hand, sunglasses hiding their coward eyes. "Mr. Rivers," the taller one began, "the board has decided that, due to repeated non-compliance, we're moving forward with foreclosure proceedings. You'll need to vacate by—" Malcolm cut him off, leaning forward in his chair. "Vacate? You think I'm some tenant in your summer rental? This is my land. My granddaddy's bones are in this dirt. My blood's in this soil. And you're telling me to vacate?" The man cleared his throat. "Sir, we understand your emotional attachment, but progress requires—" Malcolm laughed. Not the kind of laugh that says, "funny joke," the kind that says, "funeral's coming." "Progress," he said slowly. "That what you call stealing with air conditioning?" The reps exchanged nervous glances. One tried to smile. "We're just following community standards." Malcolm stood. His shadow swallowed them. "Community standards. Let me tell you something. I am the community. Without me, you got nothing but wood, nails, and lies." They stammered something about final warnings and retreated fast, tires spitting gravel as they drove off. Malcolm stood on the porch long after they left, fists clenched, eyes burning holes into the valley of stolen houses below. That evening, Joe showed up. He didn't even wait for an invite, just marched in, slapped the foreclosure letter on the table. "I heard, Malk. Whole damn county's buzzing. You can't fight this. They got lawyers, judges, banks. And I got a river," Malcolm cut in, voice cold. "You don't say it like that." "I mean it," Malcolm pressed. "You see this letter? They just signed their own death warrants. I ain't the one losing everything here. They are." Joe's face hardened. "You flood that valley, you don't just take out their houses, you take out families, kids, innocent people." Malcolm slammed his fist into the table. "Innocent? Ain't nobody innocent who builds on stolen land. You eat from a poison tree. Don't be surprised when the fruit kills you." The silence after his words was heavy. The dam outside seemed to groan in agreement. Joe whispered, almost pleading, "Malk, you do this. There's no going back." Malcolm leaned back, eyes blazing. "That's the point." The days that followed were slow torture.
Every sunrise he watched those houses glitter like teeth in a wolf's mouth. Every night the dam called him louder. One evening he caught sight of a group of HOA board members gathered at a backyard barbecue. They were laughing, glasses raised, music thumping. Someone said loud enough for him to hear, "To progress!" Malcolm muttered under his breath, "Progress? You'll be toasting from rooftops when the water comes." He smiled, but it wasn't joy. It was the smile of a man who had already buried his conscience. The plan wasn't scribbled on paper. It didn't need to be. It lived in his head, as clear as sunrise. He knew the dam. He knew every bolt, every crack, every pressure point. He had helped maintain it with his father years ago. The county hadn't touched it in decades, too busy throwing money into new developments. All it would take was a little loosening. One storm, one push, and the river would do the rest. Late one night, Malcolm stood on the dam with a crowbar in his hand. The moon cast him in silver. The reservoir stretched behind him, black and infinite. He pressed the cold steel against a rusted bolt and whispered, "Maybe the Lord sent you as my weapon. Maybe this is what justice looks like." He didn't pull, not yet. He just stood there, crowbar trembling in his hands. The water roared below, louder than ever. Or maybe that was just the blood in his ears. Either way, Malcolm knew the line had been crossed. It wasn't if anymore. It was when.
The storm didn't arrive quiet. It came like a jury that had already decided the verdict. Black clouds stacked on the horizon, thunder cracking like a judge's gavel. Malcolm stood on his porch, watching the sky rip itself open. The rain hammered the valley, pounding rooftops of those 35 stolen homes. He whispered, almost smiling, "Funny, I didn't even have to send the eviction notice. God did it for me." Down below, porch lights flickered on. People scrambled with umbrellas. Kids squealed at the thunder. They had no idea the real threat wasn't falling from the sky. It was sitting uphill, wrapped in concrete and secrets. The dam. His dam. Every drop that fell felt like a drumbeat, a countdown. By midnight, the rain was relentless. The reservoir swelled, the water clawing at its cage. Malcolm walked the slick path to the dam, crowbar in hand. The storm soaked him through, but he didn't care. He was past caring. Lightning flashed. For a split second, he saw his reflection in the black water, wild-eyed, jaw set. He didn't look like the Malcolm who planted corn or drank coffee with Joe. He looked like a man who had run out of forgiveness. He pressed the crowbar to the first bolt. His hands shook, not from fear, but from the raw energy buzzing through the air. Unauthorized barn, unauthorized tractor, unauthorized man breathing on his own land, he muttered. Well, let's see how authorized your homes are when the river comes knocking. He pulled. The bolt groaned, rust screaming against steel. Thunder clapped like applause. Back in the valley, lights flickered again. One by one, the houses below seemed fragile, almost toy-like against the violence of the sky. He imagined the board members hiding inside their fancy kitchens, sipping wine, while the storm rehearsed their drowning. "They said I was out of compliance," Malcolm muttered. "Damn right I am. Out of compliance with their theft, out of compliance with their arrogance, out of compliance with their whole fake idea of progress." He wrenched another bolt. This one snapped loose. The sound was sharp, clean, terrifying. For a moment, Malcolm froze. The water behind the dam seemed to roar louder, hungrier. The storm pushed harder. Lightning danced across the reservoir. Thunder rolled down into the valley like a warning bell. Malcolm lifted his crowbar again, staring at the next bolt. His breath was ragged. He thought of his father, his grandmother, their hands in this soil. He thought of Joe's words, "You do this, there's no going back." He muttered into the storm. Maybe going back was never the point. He yanked again. Another bolt gave. The dam shuddered, a small tremor, but enough to make his heart lurch. The water surged forward, pressing against its prison. For the first time, Malcolm felt the dam tremble beneath his boots, as though it too was ready to be free. He stepped back, crowbar slick in his hand. The rain whipped across his face. He said, "Not tonight, but soon. Oh, real soon." He slammed the crowbar into the mud and stood there, chest heaving, staring down at the glittering valley. The storm wasn't the only thing waiting to break. By dawn, the rain eased, leaving the reservoir swollen to the brim. The valley below looked peaceful again, families stepping outside, shaking off the night like it was just another storm. But Malcolm knew better. They weren't living in homes. They were living in graves with front porches. And the river, his river, was already writing their obituary. It didn't happen with a roar. It happened with a whisper. The same whisper Malcolm had heard in his bones for years. The storm had swollen the reservoir past its breaking point. Malcolm stood on the dam again, crowbar in hand, but tonight he didn't even need to swing. Nature had already loaded the gun. All he had to do was pull the trigger. He leaned into the rain, muttering to himself, "Funny, they sent me eviction letters. Guess I'm sending one back. Postage paid in water." And then he wrenched the last bolt. The sound wasn't just steel breaking. It was history cracking open. The dam shuddered. The earth groaned. For a split second, silence hung in the storm. Then it came. The wall of water surged forward, unstoppable, like a beast finally unleashed. Down in the valley, porch lights flickered. Car alarms wailed. By the time families realized what was happening, the river was already at their doorstep. Laughter at barbecues turned to screams. SUVs floated like paper boats. White fences snapped like matchsticks. Malcolm watched from the ridge, the rain mixing with the spray. His face was stone. No joy, no regret. Just inevitability. They called it progress. Now tell me, what's left to progress? The houses vanished one by one, swallowed whole. The arrogance, the newsletters, the smug smiles, all gone in a rush of mud and water. It wasn't just destruction. It was memory. The river wasn't erasing. It was restoring. Somewhere beneath the flood, the land was clean again, stripped of paint, shingles, and lies. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Sheriff's lights flickered through the rain. But Malcolm didn't move. He stood tall on the dam, soaked, crowbar still in his hand like a scepter. Joe's truck skidded up the dirt road. Joe leapt out, eyes wide, screaming over the storm. "Malk, my God, what have you done?" Malcolm turned slow, his eyes glowing with something fierce, something eternal. "What I had to," he said simply. Joe stared at him like he was looking at a stranger, or maybe at a prophet. "They'll hang you for this," Joe warned, voice breaking. Malcolm gave a small, grim smile. "Then let 'em. They've been trying to bury me my whole life. Least this time I get to choose the flood. The sirens grew louder. Trucks climbed the hill. Officers spilled out, aiming lights, aiming guns. But Malcolm didn't flinch. He lifted his arms wide, rain pelting him, river raging below like his own personal choir. He shouted into the storm, into the valley, into history itself. "This land remembers who it belongs to." The words echoed, swallowed by thunder, carried by the flood. The sheriff barked orders, boots pounded, guns raised. A single shot cracked the night. Malcolm staggered, then fell to his knees. The crowbar slipped from his hand, clattering on the wet concrete. But even as he fell, his eyes never left the valley, now drowned, now cleansed. He whispered with his last breath, "Told ya, my river always wins." By dawn the flood receded, leaving wreckage where 35 homes once stood. The HOA's empire was gone, swept into memory. And Malcolm Rivers, he became more than a man. He became a legend. The one who opened the flood. The one who refused to be erased.